Safety and Wellbeing in Youth Development Work. My name's Laura Keegan, and you would have heard my other colleague Lydia Allen. We're both youth work specialists for the National Youth Agency. So I'm going to take you through a brief code of conduct and then an overview of the session. So this session is being recorded, so if you don't want to be on screen, then please stop your video. It's really important that you mute yourselves and keep yourselves on mute during the webinar. There will be points for discussion where you will be invited to unmute. And then throughout the webinar, we will be having polls and discussions. So just to go through an overview of the session, we're going to look at the impact of COVID-19 lockdown on young people and youth work. We're going to discuss digital youth work, general wellbeing, safety, and also safeguarding. And then throughout the webinars, we will have discussions and polls. And those discussions will be in breakout rooms. And we won't have an MYA facilitator in the breakout room with you. You'll be asked to facilitate those discussions yourselves. At the end, we're going to look at the support available to you. And then to finish, we'll have a Q&A session with any further discussion. So we are the National Youth Agency. So the MYA is the national body for youth work in England. We also work internationally with other national youth work agencies. And we believe that young people deserve a productive, fulfilling future. And our mission is to transform the lives of young people in England and beyond through the power of youth work. So this is the National Youth Policy, which is currently in draft status. We also recognise that we have youth workers with us from neighbouring countries present at the webinar today, not just from Grenada. But we are going to look at the development and how to implement a code of practice and ethics. And what we'll discuss today will inform the development of the code of practice. Also ongoing leadership development for youth leaders and advocates. And you would have taken part in the previous webinar with our colleagues that focused on leadership. Also support the professional development of youth workers. So recognising youth work as a profession with professional standards. And these points illustrate how your practice and wellbeing can develop youth work to a professional status. And that's what this webinar will explore as we go further. So we're going to have our first poll. So Lydia's going to launch our first poll, and this is: how has COVID-19 affected your practice in youth services and Grenada and beyond for those youth workers not in Grenada? If your answer isn't in the answers listed, we'd really like you to type it into the feedback, type your feedback into the chat box, please.
Okay, everyone, so I have launched the poll now. So if you can vote on the screen, that would be amazing. I can see a little tally of who's voted and who's not, so I'll let you know as it goes up. But there should be 38 of you who can view those options now. It's multiple choice, so you can click as many as you would like. Okay, so I'm going to end the polling. It's about 80% of you. So I've ended that and I will share the results. So you should be able to see that on your screen now. So sort of as expected, 90% of you that there's been cancelled sessions and activities, and that's completely understandable. It's great to see that there's been an increase in digital youth work, at least. I know obviously it's not as good as the face-to-face stuff that you've been delivering, but at least there's something there to communicate with young people. Closure of schools, it's been a common thing across the UK. All schools have been closed for quite a while, with some opening up recently. Working from home, we've all been working from home as well, and not working normal hours too. Just trying to juggle potentially childcare as well as working. Yeah, so all sort of common things there. But it was just to get you thinking about that. A bit of interactiveness on here too. So I'm going to stop sharing that now. I don't think we had any, did we have any additionals in the chat? I don't think we did. But yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for joining in that. So before COVID-19, you might have had lots of different sort of youth work going on. So it could have been outreach and attached. So people might have been on the streets talking to young people out and about. You might have had targeted stuff going on, so your own sessions that you were leading on. You might have been going to schools, you might have been going to youth centres. But this is very much changed now, and there's sort of less stuff going on. So you might have had to do physical distancing. There might only be the one-to-one sort of counselling rather than group sessions. Schools might have been opened or might be opening where you are. But very much in England anyway, there's been very sort of small classes of maybe 15, so that physical distancing guidelines can still take place. And some years have been able to go in and other years have been told that they can't attend. So very different in schools as well. Increase in digital, as you did on the poll, there was an increase in digital youth work. There very much has been here as well. I think in the UK we were quite behind when it comes to digital, but COVID-19 certainly encouraged us to use digital a bit more. The community centres, we put a question mark on that because it could be that actually some buildings, because they can't abide by the guidelines, they haven't been able to open, which is mirrored over here as well. Some community centres have and some haven't, just because they can't actually enforce what government guidelines say. When we were sort of talking, I was talking about the one-to-one stuff. If you are planning any face-to-face delivery, I would say that please follow your government guidelines. I won't know each of them off by heart, so please have a look at those. But over here, it's very much do one-to-one sort of face-to-face work, but at a physical distance. Please limit your group sizes. We have opened up to be able to have what we call a bubble, so a bubble of 15 people, but only working with those 15 people at each time and making sure that if someone does have symptoms to test and trace it, to let people know. Obviously, for you in Grenada, I believe there have been sort of curfews as well, so that would have restricted your services somewhat too. And also, I don't know if it's happening with you all, but in England, we've had certain cities that have extended their lockdown. Certain areas have extended their lockdown, so even if they had planned face-to-face work, they can't deliver that now. So it's just being about that flexibility as well in your planning. So in terms of future delivery, we're sort of talking about PPE, including masks and gloves, and using hand sanitizer and physically distancing where possible. But then we've also, as I said, had very much an increase in digital youth work, and I've really enjoyed engaging young people in digital youth work as well. Even though it's different, there's some positives and some negatives to it, just like face-to-face work. So if you are thinking about delivering digital youth work, I'd encourage that, but we're going to talk about it in a bit. And Laura will introduce this discussion, I believe.
So we are going to have our first discussion. You're going to be invited to join a breakout room where you're going to discuss the following. So we'd like you to give an example of your most challenging experience as a youth worker, and then share what you learnt from this and how these skills can be used during COVID restrictions to support your work with young people. So we just want you to have a little bit of time to reflect on the example you're going to share. And then you're going to be invited to join a breakout room.
When you come back, if you could pick one person's example and potentially have someone tell us about that example, just because there's quite a lot of you on here. And we want to hear what the group's discussed, but pick sort of like the best one or the most interesting one that you think other people would like to hear about. That would be amazing. So what we'll do as well is I'll put you into rooms and I will copy that text on the slide into the chat. So if you forget what you're supposed to be talking about, it'll be in the chat. But yeah, you won't have anyone facilitating you, as Laura said. So I will open those rooms now, and then please click to enter them. So I've opened them so that you should get the breakout room.
Was that another challenge was to help others transition through the COVID and the whole mental and physical situation while personally going through the same transition. And at times there was a feeling of helplessness. One of the other challenges would have been the introduction of online learning and working from home and being unable to reach those that you work with, students in your care and so on, because of lack of resources, like no internet, no devices whereby you can reach them to monitor if anything is being done and what exactly is happening with them. So this is what we would have discussed in our room.
Cool, thank you for feeding that back. All challenges that I'm sure other people can reflect on with you as well and can definitely agree with. So thank you for that. So breakout room 2, I have, and apologies if I don't pronounce your names right. So Anthony, David, Kira, Morlin, Monique, Neil, and Shakim. So who was feeding back from that group, please? David?
Shaq, where are you?
Oh, no.
Shaq is supposed to be doing it.
Oh, okay.
Hey, my internet just
No
gave
worries.
me some problems.
Don't worry, it's cool.
Yeah, sorry. All right, so and don't mind my son in the background.
That's okay.
So for our group 2, we had similar issues, and I guess everyone will have the same issues basically. One of the issues we discussed was having similar issues with what other young persons were facing, whether it be going through the financial problems, whether it were dealing with the mental state during the lockdowns. We had issues such as cancellation of projects, not being able to meet with persons face to face was very, very difficult for all of us in the group. Not most of us, I guess, deal with young persons face to face, so we were unable to reach out to them and really get them as effectively as we would when speaking to them face to face. As you know, some young men, especially, they seem more confident in down or talking about they want jobs and kind of assistance. So that was mainly the main issues that we faced in the group, very similar to group 1.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you for those reflections. And as you said, very similar, which just shows that I think COVID-19 has affected us in similar ways in youth work. I think I'm going to pass back to Laura just because I am aware of the time and I want everyone to get involved in other discussions as well. So what I'm going to do is I think for the future discussions, I'm going to ask the other breakout rooms to feedback. Would that be okay with you, Laura?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. That way everyone
Okay,
gets
cool.
to share.
Exactly, yeah. Cool. So as I was saying earlier, digital youth work has sort of definitely filled the gap in terms of places being shut. And I just wanted to run through a few things that we do at MYA to make sure that digital youth work is being planned safely and that people are still sort of engaging, because it is quite hard on a Zoom call. Like this will be an hour and 15 minutes, and sometimes that is too long for some young people to stay on. So the length of calls, we generally try and do 45 minutes maximum. And this is generally, you have a bit of interaction, maybe a few polls, maybe some breakout rooms, maybe you can bring a whiteboard on Zoom, you can do some drawings, just something a little bit more active than just talking. Thinking about the age ranges and the appropriate group numbers. So for example, if you work with young people from the ages of 13 to 25, you probably wouldn't put a 13-year-old into the same breakout room as a 25-year-old. So have a think about how you can potentially do 13 years old to 15 years old group and maybe a plus 16 group, and just as you would in a face-to-face session, to be honest. So like in this call, myself and Laura are presenting, but I also have a second person on my calls when I am delivering to young people. This is just in case there's a safeguarding matter that comes up, or at least someone's on standby. If, for example, my internet connection was to suddenly go down, there would always be someone else on the call. Privacy settings with Zoom, obviously for you guys, you came in and there's a waiting room and you had to be admitted into the waiting room. Other software also does this, but please be aware of these privacy settings so you could set them up the way you wanted to. Also the same with screen sharing, and also the same with the chat. So I don't know if you've noticed, but with this chat feature, you can only message myself or privately, and I believe Laura and the MYA account, but you can't message each other privately. So this is really important with young people, so they can't message each other, because potentially that's how cyberbullying starts. Make sure you have appropriate files. I'm sure all of us have shared the wrong email attachments once before, and this could easily happen on a Zoom call as well when you share the wrong file on a computer. So just make sure that stuff is shut down that you're not supposed to be sharing. Planning breaks, oh my goodness. So Zoom really drains you, and you do have to stay active and looking at the screen for a long period of time. So be kind to yourself and be kind to young people. And make sure you have breaks in between calls if you're doing quite a lot. So those are my sort of top tips for digital. So going into that with general well-being, this is a bit about you guys. You know, all of you have said about different working hours. Find time to communicate with your colleagues. It's so important to have that emotional connection with your team, especially if you used to see them face to face every day. It's very different now if you're working from home a lot. Planning your lunch break. It's so easy to skip lunch. It's so easy just to sit at your laptop or your computer, or even just in your office at home and not planning a break for yourself. So be kind to yourself. Have work and personal goals to achieve. So we found that in lockdown, you lose focus on, you lose your purpose of what you find so rewarding in life, and so do young people as well. So try and plan in some work and personal goals for you to work towards, and do something, plan something to look forward to, whether that's a walk outside or whether that's meeting someone, socially distancing, physically distancing from them. Just make sure you plan something for you to look forward to. Drink and eat properly. So I guess along with the lunch break aspect, make sure you're drinking plenty of water and make sure you're eating properly, because yeah, there are times when you forget about lunch and it just passes you by. And as I said, go for the walk and do some exercise if you can. Obviously this depends on where you are and what restrictions are in place. So here we would only be allowed to go out for about an hour of exercise a day when we had restrictions, but this has been lifted now, so you're allowed out whenever, but it could be different for your country, so I don't want to assume anything.
So moving on to safety and safeguarding. This is for any activity or any work that you plan to carry out with young people. So first of all, you need to consider the risk assessment, and obviously we would advise that you follow your own organisation's template. But a risk assessment is about reviewing what you're doing, highlighting any potential hazards, rating the risk, whether that is how common it would be for this to happen or how severe it could be if it does happen. And then also think about the steps that you're going to put in to reduce that risk. Consent and emergency contact details. If you're working with young people that are under the age of 18, this is essential because they're considered to be children, so you need to get permission from their parents or guardians for them to take part. This also gives you a great opportunity to get all of the emergency contact details and ensure that you have the correct ones. This is because if something does happen, you need access to that information as soon as possible so you can contact the right people and make them aware. Communication with your team. So first of all, letting your line manager know what activities you've planned to carry out with young people, but then also talking with your team and your colleagues about what you have planned. So this might be at the start of the activity before the young people arrive, where you sit down and plan what you're doing, discuss any potential safety issues, make your team aware of any potential risks or any issues with young people that might be attending that session that day. And it's a really good way to share what sort of strategies you're going to use as to how you're going to work with those young people. And it makes it clear with everyone that they know what's going on. Then safeguarding procedures. So this is about having a clear procedure to report issues of concern or any potential disclosures that young people might make. So if a young person makes a disclosure about their safety being at risk away from the project, you need to have a clear guidance in what you're going to be doing. So you need to know what information you require to report on, who you're going to report this to, and in what time frame. Because if someone's safety is at risk, it's really important that you know that this has to be reported quickly and suitably to your line manager or to other authorities. And then emergency procedures, knowing what to do in an emergency. So this could be if your safety is at risk during a session, could be from a fire, or it could be from severe injury. And knowing how to call the emergency services, knowing you have access to a phone, and also if you needed to evacuate a building where the assembly point is, also having opportunities to practice these exercises as well, really, really important. And it also goes back to communicating with your team, making sure that all of your team know how to do this, where all of the emergency and consent details are. So we're going to move on to our first scenario. Lydia's going to put you back into breakout rooms for this. And again, the scenario will appear in the chat box. You'll be able to remind yourself of it. But what we want you to do is have a think about what actions you would take as a youth worker. And the scenario is, you meet a young person who is really struggling with the restrictions around COVID-19. They feel more isolated and have started to engage in risky behaviours. So the discussion you'll have is, what actions will you take as a youth worker? Now, Lydia already mentioned that we will go to different groups to feedback this time, but it's important that you nominate a person who is going to be able to feed back a summary of your discussion.
Okay, everyone, so I'm going to open all the rooms now, and I will copy that scenario into the chat. So if you forget what the scenario is, you'll be able to read it in the chat. So you should have had an invite.
I am here.
Yes, go for
I
it.
just want to do some reporting for my group. It's very brief.
Yeah, go for it.
We look at the situation in two contexts. One, if the individual could communicate, and if the individual cannot communicate, because you could be in a situation where you just cannot communicate at all, especially verbally, but maybe with your different signs. And we look at it saying, once we could have communication, we assess, we analyze the situation. And if we as an individual, the youth worker could help, we help. If it's in a case where we need to do referral, be it the police, be it the social worker, be it medical, we will. But if it's something that you could do for yourself within your capacity, then you provide that service. And we also look at it in the context that if you could find no form of communication and you think that person is in distress, then you look for the outside assistant, be it medical, be it a social worker, be it the police.
No, brilliant. Thank you for that feedback. Definitely. It is really interesting what you said about if you can communicate or not communicate with that young person. I think that is something that some young people don't want to communicate with you, especially if you were trying to engage them in sort of detached youth work on the street, they might try and ignore you. So yeah, no, some great thoughts there, and connecting other services, which is very important. If you feel like your skills can't, you're not able to sort of help yourself, it's great that you can sort of go to the services that do offer that support for that young person. That's really important. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Laura? No? Okay, cool. So I'm going to go into the next group. So again, apologies if I don't pronounce your name properly. So I've got, in breakout room 4, I had Josh, June, Kevin, Mary, Melandra, Tiffany, and Caesarea. Apologies if I didn't get that right, but who would like to feedback from breakout room 4?
Good morning to everyone.
Hi, June. Hi.
June. It is June.
Hi, June.
Hi. Our group members, we came up with some suggestions as to, or recommendations as to how we can assist that individual who may have been facing challenges. We first looked at, we try to put ourselves in a position where we give the individual a listening ear. We try to encourage the individual to be open. Once we have provided the perfect environment, we got that person at ease or very comfortable so that they're actually in a position where they can speak, So you create the perfect environment for the individual. When they become comfortable, you give them all the needed attention that they may require. So they listen to them as twice as you may speak. Then we may try to provide some coping activities as to what we can do to help that person to be the individual they were prior to facing such challenges. We probably could recommend that you may read a book, sip on some coffee, or you go for little walks, take your dog to the park or something of that nature, just to curb your mind and create that bit of ease and the perfect mindset, if I should say. We recommend, if it is a case where the individual may need professional advice or that bit of support from a professional, we can make referral to probably a social worker, a counselor, or we can also refer them to the crisis hotline. In situations like these, there's always a hotline, so we are willing to share the number with them and to make referrals. We also suggest that you try to create that bond with the individual, whereby you don't just leave them after, it shouldn't be a one-off. So you do follow-ups. After a period of time, you can create that bond with the individual to find out how have you been coping prior, during, and after, So you assess the individual through an all-rounded approach. I think that's what we came up with so far. Thank you very much.
That was great. So I think I totally agree, using those active listening skills and making the young person feel really comfortable so that they're able to share what's going on for them, and then accessing other services. And as you say, making referrals, really, really important, getting the actual support that they need. Lydia, which group next is to contribute?
So we've got breakout room 5 next, and that consists of, again, apologies about names, Arlene, Deslin, Johan, Sherwin, Ronnie, and I have someone who, I have their surname, but I don't have their first name, but it's breakout room 5. So who would like to talk back from that group?
Okay, hi. Okay, so I will be talking for group 5.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me, right?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So our group members, some of the recommendations that we came up with to help assist someone who feel more isolated and engage in risky behaviors. So our first recommendation is to give them a safe zone where they will be able to talk and to communicate. Because I know a lot of young persons, going through, the impacts of COVID and so forth, they will feel traumatized and so forth. And not all of them will be able to just walk up to a person or, to just open up to someone and, tell them their business or tell them the problems they're going through. So we will be able to, give them that safe zone where they will be able to open up and talk. Once they're able to do that, with their permission, we'll be able to offer some assistance. under the Ministry of Youth, we have our social care departments that's there to assist persons who may need counseling and so forth. We can transfer them to that department. If not, based on the situation, if it's something that's really, really serious that, that we cannot actually assist, then, you can transfer them probably to the police or even a social worker, and then they will be able to see what they can do to at least assist these people. And that's our contribution.
Thank you, that's great. I think it is really important creating that safe space and creating a trusting relationship. And I like the way that you are asking for consent from the young person to refer them on to other services that they may need. So they're actually part of making that decision to access help and support. That's really, really important.
So on to the next group, we've got breakout room 6, and that consisted of Avril, Chantel, Glenda, John, Jude, and Lydia. Not me, another Lydia. So who would like to feedback from breakout room 6?
Glenda reporting.
Excellent. Glenda, yes, go for it.
So we're going to do things a little bit different. While we understand and we agree with some of what is said, we have a scenario. And well, not a scenario, it's an experience during the COVID-19. So we're going to call this person Jane Doe. And Jane Doe's experience would have carried her through a series of events which led, to what we're discussing here. So Jane Doe was deprived of stipend, or let's call it salary. And as a result, Jane Doe felt cornered, so she reached out, right? In reaching out, Jane Doe's attempt to wait on the process, Jane Doe found herself in some trouble with the law, with her behavior, so the police got involved. And in trying to assess Jane Doe's situation, inquiry was made, discussion was held with her, an opportunity for her to explain herself and express herself. The situation was analyzed. However, Jane Doe was then forwarded to a unit that can help. So let's say the social care unit or a counselor. And in doing so, Jane Doe constantly kept in touch with her contact person, and Jane Doe was given assistance, back and forward. There was some sense of assurity with Jane Doe's situation, and Jane Doe felt that it was okay to open up and even reach out further. During the process, Jane Doe's psychological situation had to be assessed, and Jane Doe was given counseling, follow-up was done, and to this day, Jane Doe is still within that counseling unit getting some assistance. So this is our scenario here. We would have looked at the referral, the follow-up plan, inquiry. We look at active listening, taking all of this into consideration, understanding the situation and the effect of COVID-19 being backed in a corner. And all of this was what Jane Doe had to experience, and this is the approach we did during this night. This is a real life experience. Thank you.
I can see from the example that you're quite passionate about that, so I can imagine that was a really interesting discussion that you had, particularly because it's about a real life situation. But I hear what you're saying about advocating for the young person and also just providing that long-term support so that they can have a consistent person that they can go to because that trust has been built. Thank you.
Okay, so now we have breakout room 7, and that was Keitha, Nixon, Renelle, Shirley Ann, and Zekiel. Sorry if I pronounced those wrong. Who would like to speak for breakout room 7?
Hello, Keitha.
Hi, Keitha.
So what we discussed was you have to develop trust and understanding in order to help. So the first thing we do is that we would assess the situation using the cognitive behavioral theory. We'd find out what they're interested in, come up with some type of activity to get them engaged. And if during your assessment, if you notice that they have some mental thing, you can use some virtual counseling, like the Ministry of Youth and Sports in St. Lucia. We have virtual counseling, so you can recommend them to the psychotherapist to have a conversation. That was it.
Thank you. And again, a common theme from everyone feeding back is that you're really engaging with that young person to find out not only what their issues are, but what they're interested in, because by doing that, you can really tailor the support that's going to work for them.
Cool, thank you. So now we're going to go back up to breakout room 1 again, so sort of go back to the beginning. And we want to hear your thoughts on the scenario. So breakout room 1 was Kalisha, Erica, Hugh, Natisha, Vanessa, Zoe, and I pronounced this wrong last time. Said? I apologise because I know that isn't the right pronunciation again. I don't know if you can unmute yourself to let me know how to pronounce it from breakout room 1. Because it's French and you told me it's a French pronunciation, but I'm not sure of the pronunciation. So.
Okay, a pleasant good morning, everybody.
Hi, Natisha.
All right, so I'm presenting for breakout room 1. And first off, one of the things that we understand is that sometimes rather than young persons expressing their challenges with their voice, they usually bring it forth through their behavior, right? And looking at the scenario that was presented, the fact of isolation coming in, it means that that particular individual communication and network line was sort of broken. So hence they somewhat felt, you know, backed in a corner, isolated based on the situation at hand. So first off, we have to engage the person. For that engagement, we're gonna put in our listening skills. We're also gonna have an open discussion where the person will be able to, you know, share their challenges, the reason for their behaviors, and all of those things. And we understood that it has to take place in a safe zone, in a safe area where the person is ready and willing to talk at their own pace, because the process is not ours as the youth worker, but is that of the individual. So we actually go into the pace of the person. Right after that is take place, an assessment and so forth is gonna follow through, where we would, you know, try to find out what is it that individual is interested in, you know, what are the things that makes them happy, what are they passionate about. Also, we can, together with the individual, we'll work together to develop a plan in regards to how we can walk them through the process. So, for example, if they said, okay, probably learning to play chess is one of my passion. So you could develop and say, okay, for both of us to do it too, or for you to get it together, maybe we could get online, learn how to practice chess. You could give it maybe a 30 minutes or an hour a day, and you know, and so forth. That's just best example that come off the head. So you walk along with the person in the process until they get to where they want to go, and, you know, dealing with the other issues that lead to the behavior. Now, after all of that is done, or even in our assessment, we realize, okay, my skills is not sufficient to deal with a particular issue that the individual has. We would go ahead to do a referral, and in our referring, we need to direct them to the source that can give them the correct help. So we're not referring just while because we want to get them off our hands, but we're referring where they can actually get the help that they needed for the source of their problem. So that's our 2 pence on the discussion.
Thank you. I can see that there's a real process that you're working through with that young person about identifying the different behaviours through the assessment, action planning with that young person, and then evaluating how the action plan has worked, what further support they need. So yeah, having that process in place is so important to follow through.
So last but not least, breakout room 2. So this breakout room had Anthony, David, Kira, Morlin, Monique, and Neilin, and who would like to speak on behalf of room 2? Even.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi there, Neil.
We did not have time to select a person, a spokesperson, but I think I would go on behalf of my team. What was discussed? We first said we need to identify what is the risk activity, because different risk activity would require different strategy. But we generalize it, so the person needs to be in a state of readiness, needs to be able and willing to share the information with you, therefore building trust. And to get that person on a safe level, you need to engage them in activities that he or she enjoys. And there you would get a feel of what the person is going through. So he or she would open up to you. And then you would advise or ask if he or she wants professional help. So that then you refer the person to the expert. That is it.
Thanks, Neil, for stepping in there at the last second. So again, identify what the risk is and looking at what the appropriate strategy is going to be, and again, working with that young person the whole time. So yeah, they're really good actions, and thank you everyone for taking part in that discussion and feeding back. I think you had some fantastic strategies and demonstrated really great ways of working with young people.
So now we go on to you guys really, and all this work that you're doing. What are you doing to sort of improve your own practice and your own well-being youth worker? So you guys might already do this, but we love a debrief session. I particularly love them at MYA. So after every activity and session, we will have a debrief to the team, and we'll see how it affected how did it affect young people, how did it affect us as the deliverer? Did it go well? What could have gone better? What could be different? What would we do next time? So myself and Laura will have a debrief even after this training and say, how could it go better? What could we improve ourselves? And it's just a really great way of doing that form of reflective practice and to improve your practice in the future. Supervisions, so some of you might have supervisions. We have supervisions with our line manager, and it's not just to do with how you manage your workload, although sometimes it could focus on that. It's also a way of loading what you've gone through in your practice. If you've worked with a particularly difficult young person, or if you've been through quite an emotional time with a young person, it's good to share that with someone and to sort of let it out of your head into the open. And it can be like a bit of a relief moment for, it certainly is for me sometimes when I've dealt with difficult situations. So plan these in, and again, it's really important for your reflective practice to think about what you could have done better next time, and just to reflect on what happened. We say it is a fundamental tool as a youth worker to be reflective in your practice and to continually improve. Peer support, we do have group sessions as well, so especially if we're delivering something quite similar together as colleagues, we can then have these debriefing sessions together. But it's also just about connecting with colleagues and talking about what you might have done in the past or currently, and just gaining new ideas and sharing good practice. Like, for example, you might have heard that someone had done a climate activism session a couple of weeks ago with a group of young people, and you want to do one, so you sort of ask them, what did you do, what was good, what could you have done differently, what would be better, and sort of adapt it to your own group. And in turn, that won't just help your workload, but also help you and your well-being as well. So we share the co-reflective learning cycle here, and it's just sort of a great example of, if you haven't really done reflective practices before, or if you're not really used to it, just following its route round. So for example, if you had completed a session, you'd reflect on your experience, so reflective observation, and then you would sort of abstract, sort of conclude the learning that you had from that experience, and then try to see what you've learned from it, to see what you could do better next time, and then it sort of just goes round and round in a circle, and you could keep doing that all day long, and every session, and you just improve your practice as a practitioner, but also improve the youth work practice within your own organisation as well, and the different processes that go on within that. So yes, I feel like there might be a poll or a discussion next. A poll.
Yeah.
So I will launch it.
We've got our second poll coming up, and this is about moving forward. So Lydia's going to launch this, and it's what changes will you make going forward?
This is to reflect on your well-being and your practice, but also on suggestions that you might take back to your organisation for supporting yourself and your team. So I'll launch it now. It's not many choices on the poll. So it should be shared with you now. You should be able to vote on it. It's just about what you might take forward from this webinar, and also just from your own reflections as well, to be honest with you. So I'll keep that on there for a little bit because the numbers are going up as you vote. Okay, I think I will stop it now because it suddenly stopped. So this is about 80% of people have voted. So I'll share the results with you on screen. As you can see, most of you voted for both of them, which is completely fine. I'm really glad that none of you voted for none of the above, because I would have been, I'd have been disappointed if some of you had voted on that, but no one has, so that's really good. So about 77% have voted for like changing their daily working life and benefiting your wellbeing practice, and 86% have talked about making suggestions to your organisation, which is always good, and it's always good to be able to challenge your organisation and making new suggestions to help you and your team develop their practice more, and I'm sure they'll be open to that as well. So we'll stop sharing that now.
Okay, so we're going to move into our final discussion now. So it's following the same theme as the poll, and I'm really glad that most of you voted that you were going to either make a change to your daily life or to make a suggestion to your organisation. What we're going to do now in the discussion, you're going to be split into breakout rooms again, and I want you just to make note of which breakout room that you're in, because that will determine which point that you're going to focus on. So half of the groups are going to look at changes to daily working life to benefit wellbeing and practice, and the other half of the groups are going to look at suggestions they're going to make to their organisation for supporting the team.
So I would like breakout room 1, 2 and 3. Sorry, I'd like breakout room 1, 2, 3 and 4 to discuss the first point. So what changes will you make to your daily working life to benefit wellbeing and practice? And I would like breakout room 5, 6 and 7 to look at suggestions that you'll take to your organisation for supporting the team. So when you get your join invite on screen, you will see which breakout room you're going into. That should hopefully help. And I'll post those points into the chat so that you can see them if you forget what you're supposed to be talking about. So just opening the rooms now.
Excuse me 1 minute.
Yeah.
This is Gary Blair. The last breakout room I didn't get in.
Oh, okay. Do you have an invite? Oh, okay, I see. I think it's because people's internet are dropping out. So I'm just going to add you in now.
Okay, welcome back everybody. I hope you found that discussion interesting. So the way we're going to feedback this time is I'm going to invite each group in turn to feedback one thing they would either change to their daily working life or one suggestion they're going to make to the organisation supporting the team. So group 1, could your spokesperson tell us one thing that you are going to change to your daily working life to benefit wellbeing and practice?
Okay, then reporting for group 1. Well, I'm gonna zero in on self-care because all of the 5 other suggestions that we come up in can fall underneath that heading. So self-care for you as the individual is important, and incorporating that in your practice, you will be a better individual in regards to the service that you provide to the persons that you deal with.
Thank you. I totally agree with you. Yeah, that was great. Group 2, could you share one thing that you're going to change?
Well, I have to say group one seemed to be peeping and listening on our conversation. You know what I mean? And it's not fair, but they get one. All right. But yes, well-being is very, very important. I think, and what she was just saying, self-care, that was basically consensus. Because when you look at self and your happiness, your health, prosperity, and that kind of things that come, every one of those things come together, you're better for it. And then you'll be a better person to help your individuals that you're working with. So yeah, between the two of us, yeah, that word is definitely it.
Self-care. Thank you, that's great. Group 3, could you tell us what change you will make? Group 3?
Okay, so I would present for group 3. The change that we would make is time management, better, more effective time management skills.
Yeah, time management is extremely important, definitely for well-being, scheduling in those breaks, making sure that you have time to speak with your colleagues and line managers so that you're in a good place to work with young people. Thank you. And group 4, the final group to share what they're going to change to their daily working life.
Reporting for group 4, we came up with, we will focus basically on structure. For anything to succeed, there must be some form of structure that you follow. And if we were just to elaborate a bit, we tried to set realistic goals with realistic timeframes as well, which will be achievable. We looked at creating a structure of a youth database or a database of counselors and key persons. Then we look at structure in terms of creating weekly schedules, which will serve as a guide to accomplishing our goals and functioning more effectively as an organization. We also looked at structure of our time schedules for phone calls. If we say we work with young people, but there must be some form of structure in terms of your time frame that you prioritize which calls are more essential to deal with now, or which could be left for a later date. So in everything, structure plays an important part in terms of prioritizing your events, your activities, with the hope of achieving success in the end.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's really important. That infrastructure to any service will enable you to be more professional and provide a really high standard of service. Okay, we're going to move to group 5 now. And can you share one suggestion to the organisation for supporting the team, please? Someone from group 5?
I will speak on behalf of group 5.
Thank you.
All right, so one of the suggestions we have to the organization, they should offer more focus on training to employees. So then the information and the training that we're going to receive, we'll be able to better assist and be able to do our jobs more effectively. And also with that, being able to focus more on an outcome than an income. That's our contribution.
Thank you. I like that. That sounds really good. It's an outcome rather than an income. I think training is essential to having a fit for purpose workforce. So I think that's great. Thank you. Group 6. Could somebody share your suggestion, please?
Hi, I will present for group 6. We had 5 suggestions. It's kind of hard for me to choose one, but I'm going to go with the idea of tackling slow delivery of services. So we're going to try our best to advise the organization to help us to implement systems that would assist in prompt delivery of services. So these systems must be clearly communicated to every team member so that they would be able to know the different timelines that they would work with. If they're not getting the assistance through one medium, they would know what is the alternative that they can reach out to. So once this is implemented, we hope that with clear communication, everybody would feel competent to be able to assist the persons that we work with.
Thank you. Having a quick response is essential, because if things are left too long, the needs of the young people can really change, and you know, it can cause more problems for those young people. I think we're up to group 7, the final group, who, if the person from group 7 could share their suggestion, please. Somebody from group 7?
Okay, good morning, everybody. With regards to group 7, we thought of developing a database that would show the assessment of our teams or the persons that we work with, as well as having a standard planning guide that in the event something were to happen, persons will know exactly what we're working from. The perfect example was with COVID. Some persons was able to prepare, especially in the smaller islands, since we knew what was happening in the larger countries. However, what if something or another pandemic, another emergency comes that we do not have enough time to prepare? How are we going to support our teams if we do not have structures in place that everybody is aware of it, so that we can implement in the event of those emergencies? So we think that if we have proper structures, proper implementation of those structures, then we can support, and persons would not feel overwhelmed. Persons would not feel too traumatized, because they know what they have to do in the event of emergencies.
Thank you. It's good. It's really important to have a clear contingency, and I think going through this pandemic has really showed and demonstrated to everybody that we need to have a backup plan, and we need those structures in place and those databases, access to that information, so that those young people that need it can access the support quickly and in a way that they are able to access it. Okay, thank you everybody for taking part in the last discussion. We're going to move on now, and this is the final section of a question and answer section. So if you do have a question, either type that into the chat or raise your hand, and we'll invite you to unmute to ask the question. There'll also be a feedback survey, and the link is going to be put into the chat very soon, so you'll be able to see that. So we'd like you to all complete the feedback survey, but before you do that, if anyone does have any questions, please can you type it into the chat or raise a hand.
I just put the link into the chat, so if you want to click on that, it'll take you to the survey. There might potentially be a question that was brought up in your discussions that you're having in your breakout rooms, or there might even be a question that you might not want to ask us, but you might actually want to ask someone who you're with a breakout room with, or yeah, about that practice or about that organisation or something. So very open to whatever question you might have. Oh yeah, Melandra, I'm going to unmute you.
Yes, hi. My question is about the discussion we had about the youth in isolation and risky behavior. Let's assume that a youth calls you in the middle of the night
saying that they feel suicidal and they want to cut themselves and so on. And you have referred them and done all the good things that you think you should do or supposed to do. How do you detach yourself from the situation to the point that you do not feel accountable for any further actions that the person might take?
I would first of all say what is absolutely essential in any relationship with a young person is that you're really clear on the boundaries of that professional relationship and that you focus on it being a professional relationship. So you befriend young people, but you're not their friends. You are there to support them, but there are limits to how they, first of all, can access you and to how much support you can give. If a young person needs support in the middle of the night, I would be saying that you need to lay it out very clear with a young person that you can't be accessible all hours of the day and night because the boundaries of your relationship stop at some point, and that if they're having those feelings at those times, that there are other services out there that can support them. So here, for instance, we have Couth, which is an online counselling service. There are the Samaritans, there's Childline, the NSPCC, which have phone lines that young people can access 24 hours. But in terms of being able to access a youth worker, that is agreed times between the young person and the youth worker, and their line manager would support that. Lydia, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I would just say that as a youth worker, it is because you are passionate and you want to help that young person, it is a hard thing to be able to detach yourself, especially if you work in that young person for like quite a long period of time. So I completely get where you're coming from. But yeah, professional boundaries really does help with that. And it just shows how compassionate you are as well in terms of trying to sort of avoid that too much emotional connection. Yeah, that's a good question. Does anyone else have anything or something they might want to add to that as well, or another question?
Yeah, David Brown here. No, honestly, I heard everything both of you were saying, and I can agree with you on what we will call the social worker, especially in those psychological things that you were trained to do. But that, to me, where you left your work outside the house or leave the work at the office type thing, that really don't come, When you get involved and you see young people on a constant basis and they actually trust you, okay, to do something, or they know that when they call, if there's something that they want, or if they're in trouble and anything, that you would probably be there for them and they trust you. Young people really don't want to trust nobody else, That first contact is, oh man, it's serious. The first contact is a real wide thing, okay? And I find that when you and that young person that trusts you to do something, or trusts you with their knowledge, with their information, or trusts you with what's going on with them, to share something on the phone, I don't see a lot of that happening here. To share the truth, to share the person on the phone. And as I said before, if I have to refer that young person to somebody else or to some other organization, it has to be somebody that I know that's going to take good care of that particular person, that young person, you know what I mean? And not just any native person, because I found that social workers and these line people and the persons online, they just seem to just go through the norm, what you're supposed to do. Okay, they don't have that full care thing about them for the young people. Are actually looking to make sure that the young person come out of what they're in. And that is one of the biggest problems that I have with a lot of these social agencies. All right. And
yeah,
basically
definitely. Just in terms of England and our sort of legislation guidelines, and Laura, do come in if I've got this wrong, but social work has a lot more sort of red flag and a lot more rules than youth work does. So we can talk sort of more openly, and we don't have as many processes that social work has to go through. So in terms of that, young people tend to, there's more trust built between the youth worker and a young person in my point of view, than social work, just because one, social workers have so many cases and very little time to sort of go through everyone. But youth workers, like you were saying, can develop those meaningful relationships and really build that trust. Whereas in social work, sometimes they just don't have enough time to, which is really sad. But yeah, that is what we found as well. Doris, do you want to?
Yeah, I would say that the real focus on all of our work with young people is that it's a voluntary relationship. Those young people choose to engage in a professional relationship with us because of the way we work with them, and that trust is enabled through that relationship. And quite often when we involve other services, we're talking about statutory services where the young person then has no choice but to engage with them. They may not want to, but because of their current circumstance, they may have to. Now, working with young people and working with very high risk young people, one of the things that I found really valuable was to make really good connections with the other services, get to know them, get to know the people that work within them, how their processes work, so that when we are referring young people to those services, we can talk them through it, let them know what to expect, and also know that they're going to be referred to someone that is going to be good for them, that you trust yourself, that you have a professional trust for. So I would say getting to know those other services, introducing yourself, building those professional connections are also really important.
So thank you for your points, David. Glenda, I can see that you've got a hand up. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Sure, thank you.
No worries.
I've sat here and I've listened, and I nearly didn't have a question for you, but listening to David, I tend to understand where he's coming from. So I'll tell you, it's a bit about me being passionate about youth and youth development. And it has come from a lot of years of working with youth, just volunteering within my community. And now seeing it as a duty and an obligation. And my question is, I mean, I would have done some training last year, right? Late last year. And while I understand, you know, the training and the level, I understand all what you're saying here, but sometimes it's so difficult. So my question is, how do you detach? And how do you really separate yourself from this, you know? And I'm talking, I mean, I'm looking at me as an individual, you know? How do you detach? How do you separate? Because sometimes it's so difficult. It's so difficult.
I totally agree. It is very, very challenging. And I think that's why it's so important that you have those support structures around you. So having regular supervision with your line manager, so they understand how you're working with young people and the issues that you're discussing with that young person. So not only that they can advise you on suitable ways to support them, but also so you can talk through those issues yourself, so you're not taking them on board emotionally. And if your line manager isn't in a position to do that, one suggestion is to set up a peer support group with other youth workers working in similar situations, so you can talk with each other, offload, and support each other that way. Because I know you do take those issues on, and having groups set up and processes set up for you to be able to offload that is essential to everybody. So not only in terms of line management supervision, but either peer support or non-managerial supervision. Obviously, a lot of these things come at an additional cost, but processes that you can set up yourself by talking with colleagues, debriefing, again, really, really important. So you're able to discuss those issues as they're happening with your colleagues. Lydia, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
No, not really. Sort of everything you say, what really helps me is debriefing with my manager. So in this sort of COVID-19 lockdown, we've had a lot of cases of mental illness. So people really getting more anxious from being inside and restricted, sort of not being able to go out, not being able to see their friends, and therefore their mental health has suffered. And I've been really worried about those young people. So I think being able to sort of express that to my line manager and talk about the individual cases has really helped me, because especially in lockdown, you do feel a little bit useless because you can't go out and you can't do what you would have done if you had been able to see those people face to face. So yeah, debriefing and talking to people about it has been a huge sort of weight off my shoulders. I don't know if journals will help you, but I know quite a few people who have like a learning or a practice journal. So they sort of write down what's in their head, and because it's almost that thing of going from your head onto the piece of paper, it just helps with that sort of sense of relief. So that might also help you.
And I think talking things through actually also lends itself really well to reflective practice. So perhaps that's something that you could look into a little bit more. But when also one thing to consider is confidentiality. So if you're talking to colleagues, it's to not use the names of the young people, just to protect those young people, and also being clear not to just talk to anyone about it. If it's about your needs and supporting you, then obviously by all means, get access to and support from people that do support you, but just to be mindful of confidentiality.
Thank you.
No problem.
Very good advice, and thanks very, very much for that. I don't think I have much to say, anything else to say after that, after what you just said. But just we have to bear in mind that it's also going to come down to the individual, because working with young people in this job is going to affect you personally. And that's where your part of your well-being does come in. Because if we can't really support ourselves, if we can't take the time to make sure that we are still on the top of our game or in the game itself, then we're going to be in trouble, because we're not going to be able to assist the young people the way they need it and to impact them the way we need or it's necessary to make them change, to wait for the change to come about. So yeah, it all depends on us.
That's so true. That's so true. No, thank you for that. Yeah, it's been interesting with COVID-19, because I think youth workers as well have been really feeling the effect of it. So our well-being now, when young people really need us, is so important. Does anyone else have any questions or any points they'd like to raise?
Yes, I'm Jude here. I was just wondering if some of the response might not be culturally determined. So for example, in a small community or small island where we're closer in touch with our people. So for example, that call at midnight, where this young person, it could be someone in the community, right, needs help. We may not have services to refer them to. So I think in some cases, some of it might be culturally relevant, where, I'll have to step a couple of houses down the street and provide some level of support until maybe the police or some counselor comes, right? So, so yeah, I think we are a bit closer, I would say, to the constituents that we serve. So I think we kind of more emotionally connected to them than in a bigger country where, it's just on a really much larger scale.
That completely makes sense. Yeah, and definitely take it into your own, how you work and how the community works around you as well. Because, for example, some of the young people I work with, they actually live in Scotland or Wales. So in terms of geographical distance, they're quite far. So it's not like I could just pop down the street to see them. So yeah, definitely take on in terms of your social structures around you. But take care of yourself as well. Like we were just saying, if you're struggling yourself, then don't try not to take too much on, basically. Laura, would you like to add to that?
I was just going to say, I think that is a really valid contribution, because actually, if you live in a small community, you're quite right, you could get that call at midnight and they could live 2 doors away, and you're the person expected to provide the support. But I would say that it's really important then that if that could be the case potentially, that you have some kind of risk assessment built in and in place, that if that sort of support is required, that you know how to act on it, and you already have an agreed set of practices with your line manager as to how you're going to respond in that situation. So then you know that you're protected. So you could be taking on something quite difficult, but you know that you deal with that, you let your line manager know, and that in the morning you're going to have a debrief with your line manager about what happened and how to provide the ongoing support for that young person.
Yes, thank you for that feedback.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to add anything or questions or anything? I know that we have gone over time by quite a bit, but we wanted you to be able to discuss stuff and be able to feedback, because I think that's quite good practice and it's quite fun as well. You get to talk to everyone. So if there's nothing else, we'd just like to say a big thank you for all of you that have attended, for joining in our discussions, for joining in the breakout rooms, and doing the polls. And this is being recorded, so it has been recorded, so we can share this with you. So if you've had internet trouble, which I know a lot of people have had, you can watch it back and you can watch all the bits that you missed. But thank you so much. We've really enjoyed this webinar, and I hope you have too. And yeah, have a good day, because we'll have a good evening now, but I believe your day's just started. So yeah, have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.